San Francisco is a city chock full of things to see and do. I spent 48 hours exploring the city, mostly on foot, and have some pros, cons, and suggestions to share. I will review 20 sites and rate them with 1 to 4 stars. I tried to hit all the highlights in 2 day trips to the city. A few things to note before we begin. There are over 50 museums in San Francisco which I did not include in my itinerary since they take up so much time. There are ferries from San Francisco to both Sausalito and Alcatraz. Both are wonderful day trips that I covered in previous videos and have left links in the description below. I didn't include them here because they both take up a big chunk of time. If you have more than 48 hours in the city, I'd recommend both, especially the sunset tour of Alcatraz. I'd also like to address walking in the city, especially for my fellow senior travelers. San Francisco is an incredibly hilly city. I thought I had mapped out a plan that avoided too many hills, but one place just about did me in, which I'll explain later. San Francisco has great public transportation with BART trains, buses, trolleys, and cable cars. I chose to walk because I enjoy it, but there are plenty of other choices to get around. Also, much has been written lately about safety in San Francisco. During my 2-day visit, I felt very safe during all my wandering. A local told me that there are some places where the problem is more prevalent, namely the Tenderloin District and parts of the Mission District. I didn't visit either of these places. San Francisco is a stunningly beautiful city, and it would be a shame to avoid it because of perceived danger. With that said, like any big city, you should always know where you are going, be vigilant, and if you are driving, don't leave valuables in your car. As a senior solo traveler, I never felt unsafe on my daytime walking itinerary and was pleased with how clean and welcoming the city was. So let's get to it. I stayed in Burlingame, which is a southern suburb. I took an easy train ride into the city in the morning and got off on the Montgomery Street exit. From there, it was a short walk to my first destination, Salesforce Park. Salesforce Park is a rooftop garden on top of this interesting structure, which is a transit center. To reach the garden, you enter through a grand atrium and take a long escalator to the 3rd floor. Once outside, you are floating above the street and surrounded by skyscrapers. It felt somewhat surreal. There is a path that loops around the park with signage about the various gardens. My favorite part was this very long fountain that responded to movement from the buses below. 3 stars for Salesforce Park. It was one of my favorite places I visited, mainly because I love the juxtaposition of the gardens surrounded by the skyscrapers. Rincon Park. This is a very small park right on the edge of the bay. Its main attraction is this wonderful sculpture. It also has great views of the Bay Bridge. 1 star for the park, 2 for the sculpture and views. Ferry Building. Just a short walk along the shoreline from Rincon Park is the Ferry Building. This is a landmark building where you can catch the ferries to Alcatraz and Sausalito. The building is quite massive with numerous shops and cafes. It is not a bad place to hang out, grab a bite, and watch the boats come and go. 1 star because unless you are taking a ferry, there are better places to see. Transamerica Pyramid. This is an iconic building that is identified with the San Francisco skyline. You can't go inside the building because it's an office building, but if you are walking by it, it's quite an impressive piece of architecture. From the ground, you can't see the top, but if you head a few blocks away, you can take some nice photos. Check it out if you are passing by, but there is probably no reason to seek it out. 1 star. Chinatown. San Francisco's Chinatown is the oldest in North America and the largest enclave outside of China. It covers many blocks and is lined with an abundance of shops. I arrived early in the morning when many of the shops were just opening, so the place felt a little deserted. I enjoyed peeking into some of the shops that had so much merchandise it was hard to take it all in. The buildings in this part of town seemed older with more history. After wandering through the streets, I thought Chinatown might be a better place to visit later in the day or in the evening. It would be nice to see the lanterns light up. 2 stars, but I would go for lunch or dinner, not as early as I arrived. Coit Tower. This is another historical landmark. It was built in 1933 on top of Telegraph Hill, and you can see 360-degree views of the city from the top. I walked from Chinatown up Telegraph Hill to the base of the tower, and my activity tracker told me I climbed the equivalent of 25 flights of stairs. When I got to the tower entrance, the elevator wasn't working, and the only choice was to climb 13 flights of stairs to the top. I had checked their website earlier, which said their elevator is sometimes out of order. I had to wonder if it isn't usually out of order since they put it on their website. I had been prepared to walk up the stairs, but after walking 25 flights to get to the base, it was too much for me to do another 13. There were some decent views from the plaza, but nothing worth the hike. I'll give this one a reluctant 1 star. I'm sure if you can get to the top, it has great views, but be forewarned, you might have some climbing to do. Fisherman's Wharf. This is probably the #1 tourist destination in San Francisco and feels like a tourist destination. It's basically the Times Square of San Francisco. There's a fun and lively atmosphere to the place, with much to see and do. My favorites were Boudin's, which is famous for their sourdough bread. Out on the pier are sea lions that have taken over the pier, and the Musée Mécanique, which has all these vintage arcade machines, some of them kind of scary looking. Oh, and if you have kids, there are amusement park rides. Now, I was at Fisherman's Wharf somewhat early on a weekday, so it was quite pleasant. However, it can get crazy on the weekends, so maybe plan your visit accordingly. 3 stars. Golden Gate Bay Cruise. From Fisherman's Wharf, I booked an hour-long Golden Gate Bay Cruise through Red and White Fleet. I have left a link in the description below. It was a well-spent $38. The boat traversed under the Golden Gate Bridge and around Alcatraz Island, with a piped-in narration that pointed out various San Francisco landmarks and gave some history along the way. Since I had limited time, I thought this was the best way to experience the Golden Gate Bridge. The boat rode underneath it, so you could get an idea of its expansiveness and brilliantly cabled construction. It also took us around Alcatraz and near the Bay Bridge before returning to the pier. It was a great trip. 4 stars. Ghirardelli Square. Adjacent to Fisherman's Wharf is Ghirardelli Square, which was built in 1966 and is the home of all things chocolate. The square includes several stores where you can purchase bags of chocolate or get an ice cream sundae. Since I'm not a chocolate person, I was more taken by the building itself. It has a couple food restaurants with glorious views of the bay. This would be a good place to park yourself for lunch. 2 stars. Aquatic Park Cove. A few steps away from Ghirardelli Square is the Aquatic Park Cove, where permitted boats can anchor. The Maritime Museum is also there. I just walked through it, but it is a lovely setting with views of the boats and harbor. There's a small beach where people were getting their feet wet and a grassy area for picnicking or sunbathing. It's a good place to relax after all the walking at Fisherman's Wharf. 2 stars. Fort Mason is an historical fort that at one point was used for harbor defenses. I stumbled upon it on my way to the Wave Organ. This was another place I saw on the map that I didn't realize had elevation. There was a lower level with warehouses and then an upper level which was the site of the original coastal fortifications. I was walking along the shoreline and suddenly had to climb a hill to the upper level. Fortunately, the hill was not that steep. When I crested the hill, there were some more stairs that I climbed to see some pretty views. Adjacent, there is the Great Meadow Park. It is a huge park that had only a few trees. 1 star. Wave Organ. I walked a long distance to experience the Wave Organ. I loved the idea of it and decided to go out of my way to visit. The concept is this. The Wave Organ is a wave-activated acoustic sculpture located on a jetty in the bay. Sound is created by the impact of waves against pipe ends and the subsequent movement of the water in and out of the pipes. It's a wonderfully creative concept. I understood that it works better at high tide, so I designed my itinerary to arrive at exactly high tide. Unfortunately, only one pipe was making any sound, so I was rather disappointed. Here is the sound of the one pipe. So you can see it would be pretty awesome if all 25 pipes were making sounds. It is still an interesting work of art with some alcoves and benches for enjoying the ambiance. However, it wasn't quite successful on that day. 1 star from my experience, 2 stars for the concept and creativity. At this point, I hailed an Uber, which took me to the other side of the peninsula to Land's End Lookout and Trails. This turned out to be my favorite place of the day. My legs were pretty tired at this point, so I didn't explore as much as I'd like. If I had a do-over, I would allocate a half day just for this area. The paths followed the shoreline's rocky cliffs, which makes for stunning views of the ocean and coastline. The paths wander through amazing trees. The sutra baths are here and require a steep climb down from the parking lot. There is also a memorial for the USS San Francisco. As you can see from this map, there is a loop trail. Out and back from the parking lot is a little over 3 miles. 4 stars for this beautiful slice of nature. The next day, I had the luxury of my daughter being a guide and chauffeur. Our first stop was Palace of Fine Arts. It is a beautiful structure that was originally built for the Panama Pacific Exhibition in 1915. There are a series of structures that line a lagoon, and it is beautiful from just about any angle. As a matter of fact, there were many people getting their pictures taken. I saw graduates in caps and gowns, models, and teens decked out in their quinceanera dresses. There is a main dome building that when you go inside, you realize how tall the structure is. It is a gorgeous setting and certainly one of the highlights of my trip. 4 stars. My next stop was the Presidio, which is a vast area that has trails, picnic areas, beaches, lookout points, and much more. I only saw a fraction of the area. The Presidio used to be a military base, so you can see many old barracks that have been repurposed. My daughter works in the Presidio, so she brought me to a beautiful little park with a small pond and fountains. Here are a few images of the area I explored. Three stars. Lucasfilm has offices in the Letterman Digital Arts Center at the Presidio, so there is a Yoda statue for all those Star Wars fans out there. You can enter the lobby of Lucasfilm and see some more character figures, but security doesn't allow you to go farther and has rules about picture taking. 2 stars for Yoda lovers. Painted Ladies and Alamo Square. This is another iconic spot in San Francisco. The TV show Full House showed the homes in its opening credits, so fans of the show have given the houses social significance. I never watched the show, so thought it was probably overhyped. However, I was delightfully surprised at how much I enjoyed the square and the surrounding buildings. The Painted Ladies, which is a term used for brightly colored Victorian houses, are very pretty with special architectural details. The park itself sits high up and allows some pretty views of the entire area and beyond. Tourists seem to gather here and just hang out on the grass. It was sunny that day, so the park was full of visitors. 3 stars. Lombard Street. Driving down Lombard Street is a San Francisco tourist tradition. Lombard Street runs from one side of the Presidio to the bay, but at one point it zigzags down a steep hill. Here's a view of it from a distance. The speed limit is only 5 miles an hour, and cars line up all day long to traverse it. My daughter drove me down it, and here is the view from the sunroof of the car. It's certainly a pretty little area, and unusual the way the road switchbacks down. Is it worth waiting in line? Well, some might find it underwhelming. However, it is still an iconic thing to do, so I'll give it 2 stars. The Golden Gate Park is a huge park, larger than Central Park in New York City. There are many things to do in the park, and you could spend an entire day there and probably still not see everything. If you have limited time, I suggest a couple areas. There is a vast lake in the middle that has some great spots for picnicking or relaxing. And there is the Queen Wilhelmina Garden, which has a windmill and many flowers. It's a small little garden, but it packs a punch. Oh, and I should mention there is also a bison paddock. Who would have thought? 3 stars. Beautiful architecture. I'm adding a 20th number to this list in order to include the glorious architecture of the city. I could have taken a hop-on, hop-off bus and saved myself from some walking, but then I would have missed walking by some amazing homes. I have a new respect for San Francisco after walking up and down streets for 2 days. If you do nothing else when visiting the city, enjoy the magnificent homes that line the streets. 4 stars for the city's architecture. So I hope this information helps you if you are planning a trip to the city. I will be posting a video with suggested itineraries, so look for that. And senior and solo travelers, check out the description below for more specific advice. And if you'd like to follow more of my senior and solo travel journeys, please like and subscribe. Cheers!